No, they don't. They are wonderful and dedicated and here on time. Yes.
I know you have. You've been absolutely brilliant. We're into the home straight now. It's the final day. It's going to be an amazing day. And we thank you again for how good you're being at getting in and out of the room on time, et cetera, et cetera. I thought I just wanted to kick off today with something that happened this week that I thought was quite interesting and entertaining on one level. We talk a lot about how digital and social media have created this world of radical transparency. And those of you who were at One Young World last year will remember that Jack Dorsey from Twitter was a councillor. And I thought, if we can pull up the slide, I thought that the tweet that went on this week between Jack and the Iranian president were quite interesting, where Jack basically, Jack reaches out to the president tweets back, and then Jack just goes to in front of the whole world, all right, so now you're on Twitter, does this mean that you're going to open up the whole of Iran to Twitter and to social media and to the digital world? So it will be very interesting to watch how that all plays out.
Just a reminder, okay, wait, now I promised Ines, poor Ines, give Ines a big cheer. Okay, can I ask you please, we've had developers all around the world working on a fix for our problem. How are we doing? Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Can I ask you, if the people who haven't got it, because some clearly have, are you on Apple devices? Okay.
You know how these work, yeah?
Hands up who really, if you don't have it, have you refreshed and tried? But some of you in the front said you had. In and out. Ines? In and out. Okay, so the team's going to be going around carrying on checking with you, yeah? Because you know some of you were saying you had it downstairs, okay? We've worked out that there's in this room, so they've tried to put together a patch to sort it out, okay? So those of you who are able to tweet on the BlackBerries or the Samsung phones, just keep going, yeah? If you haven't yet, use the YouTube booths. Don't forget to go to the Great Debate. Have we got the slide of the Great Debate? Is it here, the map? Not sure, not happening. Okay, moving on. So the agenda is very, very full. And the closing ceremony is at the end of the day. And we think there's a special guest. We think. But to start off with, David has got an even more special guest.
Yeah, I mean, I think when
even bigger one.
When you look at the need for business to be a force for good and who are the leaders and pioneers in that space, pretty much every time I talk about this, there's one company that's in every speech I make, and that company is Tom's. And there is, you know, and we're absolutely thrilled and delighted to be able to kick the business session off with a keynote address from Blake Mycoskie. Blake is the founder of Tom's. He calls himself the Chief Shoe Giver, which I think is a pretty cool title. And Tom started out with this great model of, you know, you buy a pair of shoes and they give a pair of shoes to somebody in need. They're moving now and doing a lot in the whole area of eyewear, so the same thing with glasses and cataract operations. So if we could run the little video that explains that, and then we're going to give Blake a huge welcome to the stage. So please run the video.
When I thought about launching another product with the Tom's model, vision seemed the most obvious choice.
There are 165 million people in the world who have visual impairment. 1% of the population is blind.
When we started this project, we knew nothing about saving or restoring vision. All we knew is that there was a great need.
With Tom's, we always work with local nonprofits and NGOs to understand really what the need is in a community before we just go in and start giving.
reason for people to be unnecessarily blind. Majority of blinding conditions in the developing countries are either preventable or curable, like 80%.
I think what's really important to understand is just how powerful it is to help give sight to someone in need. With Tom's Eyewear, we are able to give someone the opportunity to wear a pair of shades, knowing that there's a much greater purpose.
So please give a huge welcome to Blake Mycoskie.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Wow. To be in the room with so many young people who are so excited about changing the world is just awesome. I can honestly say that there's no place in the entire world I would rather be than with you guys here today helping kick off this session. So I was so thankful to get the call the other day, invited to come share a little bit of my story before we kick off this amazing session. So, you know, my story started 7 years ago, and actually 7 years ago I was doing something completely different with my life. I was actually running an online driver's education company. And I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but I convinced the state of California that I could teach teenagers to drive online better than in the classroom. Now, after my partners and I worked literally 90 hours a week, as many of you probably do, to get our startup off the ground, I was completely exhausted. So I went to my partners and I asked them if I could take some time off. I needed to go and refresh and recharge, and they said fine. So I went to Argentina. Now, there's a little bit of a backstory of why I went to Argentina. Actually, a couple years before, my sister and I had been on the reality TV show The Amazing Race. I don't know how many countries The Amazing Race has played, and how many people have seen this show? Okay, so quite a few people. So how many people saw it when I was on it 11 years ago? Anyone? One person. Okay, so for those of you who didn't see it, basically it's a scavenger hunt around the world for $1 million. And my sister was my partner. We raced around for 31 days, but unfortunately, we lost $1 million by 4 minutes. And for all the men in the room, the worst part about this is it was my fault, and I epitomized the cliche that guys will never stop and ask for directions. And it was actually funny, after we lost $1 million, about a month later, my sister sent me this text message, and it was this random string of numbers, and I thought, that's weird, and I was about to call my sister to ask her why she sent me this, and I thought, well, maybe she just pocket dialed me, so I didn't say anything. A month later, I get another text message from my sister. It's another random string of numbers, and so this time I call her, and I say, Paige, what's the deal with these text messages, these random numbers? And she says, Blake, those numbers are not random. That is the interest you owe me on my $500,000. And she literally keeps track of it to this day. So I have to sell a lot of shoes and eyewear. So I digressed a little bit, sorry. So the reason I went to Argentina is we went there on The Amazing Race, and I wanted to go back because on that show you don't have any time to really experience the culture and the country. So I went to Argentina, and I spent about a month there, I guess 3 weeks. And towards the end of my trip, I'd been just goofing off, you know, taking polo lessons and tango lessons and drinking amazing red wines. And I met these 3 women that were in this cafe, and I asked them what they had been doing on their trip. And they explained to me that they had been doing a shoe drive. And what that meant was they were going around collecting slightly used shoes to give to children who lived just outside of Buenos Aires, who did not have the necessary shoes to go to school. Now, I grew up in a middle-class family in Texas and never had to worry about clothing or shoes or food. And so this blew my mind because I had not experienced some of this intense poverty. And it blew my mind there were people just outside of Buenos Aires that were not being able to go to school because they didn't have the proper shoes. So I was curious, and so I asked them if I could come along with them as they distributed these shoes. And they said yes. And I went, and I had the most amazing experience. Now, up until this point, I had started 5 different companies, but never had really gotten involved in philanthropy or charity. My parents did a little bit of it growing up, but I never had like such an intimate, visceral, kind of hands-on experience as when I went to this village a couple hours outside of Buenos Aires and hand-placed these shoes on these children's feet. It was absolutely amazing seeing how excited they were for a single pair of shoes. And these shoes weren't even new, they were used. And their families were coming to us and giving us hugs and thanking us. And I remember leaving the village that day, having given about 200, 250 pairs of shoes away, just feeling so amazing. And I wanted to do something to help. Like many of you, when you had that first experience, it sparked your idea. And so later that night, I was talking to my, actually, polo teacher of all things, and I was telling him, Alejo, about my experience. And I was telling him all about it and how exciting it was and great. And he asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. He said, it's great that you guys, got these donations and gave these shoes to these kids, but what are these kids going to do when they need their next pair of shoes? Because if that's the only pair that they have and they need them to go to school, they're going to wear out of these shoes in 4 or 5 months. Who's going to be there to give them their next pair of shoes? And that was a great question because I didn't know the answer. And I remember going to bed that night actually being really troubled by this because I worried that maybe instead of doing something really great that day like I thought we did, we really just made ourselves feel better by giving these shoes away and hadn't had a lasting impact on these kids. And so I woke up the next morning very troubled with this and wanting to do something about it. So I don't know about you, but for me, the only time I have a good idea is usually in the morning with a cup of coffee and writing in my journal. And I was doing that on the farm that next day when I started thinking about this issue and how you could create a sustainable way to give these children the shoes that they needed, not just 1 month, but every 4 months for year after year to build up their self-esteem and keep them in school. Now, my background was purely entrepreneurial. I'd never been involved in charity and philanthropy, as I said. And so I started thinking about businesses. And as I was literally writing in my journal, Alejo came up to tell me it's time for breakfast. I had this idea. Instead of starting a nonprofit or a charity that would be dependent on donations, what if we started a business where every time we sold a pair of shoes, we would give a pair away, 1 for 1. Really simple. So easy to understand and to participate in. And as I was thinking about it, and I told Alejo, he got super excited. He said, we have to do this. This would be amazing for the people of Argentina. And so many of the people I know in these villages, they had this problem. And so he got very excited. And at the same time, I had my company, my day job that I had to get back to that was growing very rapidly. So I was a little bit, perplexed. And I was at that moment that probably many of you have been at when you have to kind of decide, like, am I going to follow my passion and this desire I have to help make the world a better place, or am I just going to continue focusing on myself and my business and kind of my needs? And thankfully at that moment when I called my partners at the software company back in California and told them this idea of creating a shoe company where every time we sold a pair we would give a pair and needing to stay in Argentina a little bit longer to work on this, they totally supported it. They were super excited. They could hear the passion in my voice. So I spent literally the next 2 or 3 weeks, extended my trip, handmade 250 pairs of the first pair of shoes that became Tom's, and hand carried them back in 3 duffel bags to LA to hopefully sell to my friends and family so that I could bring another pair back by the holidays. Now, unfortunately, I don't have enough time today to kind of go into all the different story of what happened from there, but I'll give you a few of the highlights. That first summer, we sold 10,000 pairs out of my apartment. A year later, we sold 2 years later, we sold almost 1 million pairs and gave away 1 million pairs. And today, we've already sold and given away over 10 million pairs of shoes, children around. Thank you. And it's totally changed my life. I mean, there's nothing I enjoy more than sharing the story and hopefully inspiring other people to think of ways that they can look at how business and philanthropy don't have to be mutually exclusive, that you can combine the two. Now, after experiencing that the 1-for-1 models working with shoes, about 2 years ago, we decided to get into eye care. As the video you just saw, I had trouble with my eyesight when I was a kid. I was lucky enough after wearing glasses and contacts to have an RK surgery so I can see perfectly now. But after hearing about so many people who are struggling, kids in elementary and kindergarten who can't see the chalkboard, and people who are elderly who are getting cataracts and losing their jobs, I wanted to do something to help. So we launched Tom's Eyewear 2 years ago, and it's been definitely a whole new set of challenges and struggles, but I think now we've given over 160,000 people their sight back. And the thing about this is it's gotten me really excited about the future, because I think that our 1-for-1 model can expand to so many different products and so many different services. And beyond just giving aid, we're really focusing now on using our infrastructure to create jobs in the communities that we serve. So about a year ago, we committed that by the end of 2015, we would make 1/3 of all the giving shoes in the countries or in the areas that we give them. So we create more jobs in these communities. We've had several starts and false attempts and even challenges in factories that we started to do but had to shut down in different parts of Africa. But I am excited to announce that in January, we will be the only shoe manufacturer in Haiti. And we'll create many, many jobs in this and hopefully a whole new industry, which I really think is a huge part of the future of our movement. Now, I don't have a lot of time left, and I know that we're getting ready to start with the session. But I want to just leave with one story of how I really first experienced how giving doesn't just feel good, but it's also really good for business. Now, when I started Tom's, it was very much a spontaneous response to help these kids who desperately needed a pair of shoes. But what I learned as I started to build the business was that giving doesn't just feel good, it actually can be good for business, and that's perfectly fine. And I learned this lesson in several different ways, but one of them was pretty funny because it involved a woman in an airport. I was in the JFK airport in New York City about 3 months after we started Tom's. And at this point, we had maybe 2 or 3 stores on the West Coast selling our shoes and no stores on the East Coast. So I'd gone there and went basically cold calling all these stores and had really no luck getting any of these new stores to buy our shoes. And I was a little discouraged and frustrated, and so I was going to the airport that day, and on that particular day, I was not wearing a pair of Tom's. Normally, I always do, but on this day, I was actually wearing a pair of running shoes. And so I went to check in at the terminal, at the American Airlines terminal, at the kiosk. And when I went to check in, I saw to my right a woman also checking in, and she was wearing a red pair of Tom's. Now, this was amazing because, believe it or not, I had never seen a stranger wearing our shoes. I'd seen my friends, my family, my interns, but never a stranger. So this was my moment to ask her what she thought and to get a little feedback. So, trying to play it cool, I said to her, "Excuse me, ma'am, I love these red shoes that you're wearing. What are they?" And she kind of looks at me, her eyes wide, and she says, Tom's shoes. Now remember, I'm playing it cool, so I'm doing the kiosk, not paying attention too much. But she wants to tell me more, and she literally, I'm not kidding, pulls my shoulder, pulls me aside and goes, "No, you don't understand. This is the most amazing company in the world. When I bought this pair of shoes, they gave a pair to a child in Argentina. And there's this guy, I think he lives on a boat in California." And literally, she starts telling me my life story, word for word, with like more passion than my mom tells it, right? And of course, at this point, I can't just walk away. I have to tell her who I am. And so I say to her, and people are gathering around. She's very animated telling this Tom story. And so I say, "Excuse me, ma'am, actually, my name is Blake, and I started Tom's." And she looks at me like deer in headlights. And she goes, "Why did you cut your hair?" That was her one question. But the funny thing is I learned so much about business from that one question, and especially about incorporating giving into your business. What I learned was when you make your business about something bigger than just profits and just the bottom line in yourself, when you incorporate a purpose, people will want to help you. People want to be part of it. And beyond that, they will tell your story for you. The hardest thing to do when you start out is to get the word out. Marketing and advertising is very expensive, usually cost prohibitive. It's very hard to get it out there. So the greatest thing in the world for your organization can be if other people tell your story. And I look in the audience here and I see 1,200 passionate storytellers. And the more that you can get other people to join you in telling your story, the faster your organization will grow. And that was one of the most important lessons I've learned in the last 7 years and all the stuff that we've done. So I wanted to share that with you this morning, and most importantly, the idea that giving feels amazing. And there's every single reason to do it just for that. But it's also really great for business. So thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Great.
Maybe, you can go off and come back up, or just grab a seat there.
Right here?
Okay. What a great way to kick off this session, which is all about the fact that business has the opportunity to, but also needs to be a force for good in the world, and that actually making money and doing good don't need to live in separate camps. And I passionately believe that the new price of doing well is doing good, and if we as businesses don't set out to do good, we won't be able to do well. So Kate, do you want to just talk a little bit about the session, then we'll bring it to the councillors?
So global business, the role of global business is one of the topics that you asked to particularly talk about and address. David always says business has not always had good intentions, but has excellent execution. So global business can be more like Blake, and the world would be a better place. So let's welcome the councillors for this session, okay? We won't do the stats from the global survey, I don't think, because we need to get a skip on here. Davey, you?
So,
yeah, go.
No.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Oh, it's me. Kate, oh, it's me. So, who better to utilize the power of technology than the youth for whom it is second nature, and to utilize it to deliver social responsibility and not egocentricity? There's a thought. An amazing and inspiring man, a huge friend to One Young World. I don't know where we'd really be without him. Someone that David and I absolutely love. He's here today specially. He's just been in Kenya, running his foundations there for the blind, seeing his people there at a time when lots of big business people are not going to places they perceive to be dangerous. There's always this wonderful CEO of Unilever, Paul Polman.
So next up, a man who, again, has been a fantastic supporter of ours over the years, doing more to change the destiny of the next generation around the world than the majority of us. Started out as a teacher. He's now the global head of citizenship at KPMG. They got that the wrong way around there. Please welcome Lord Hastings of Scarisbrick.
Okay, so the global queen of networking with 50,000 contacts in her address book. After you lot yesterday, she's probably got about 60,000. You loved her yesterday, you'll love her today. Welcome back, Carole Stone.
And then we had a terrific session with her yesterday. Please welcome back up on stage, Bethlehem, founder of Soul Rebels.
And the councillor who's changing the way we see food, the food that we give to our children, global company now, Paul Lindley. Okay, and of course we have wonderful black Mycoskie here. So let us welcome our delegate speakers.
Come on in. Huge round of applause for the delegate speakers. Paul, take it away. You know the deal.
Thank you very much, David. So I've got two fantastic delegates here this morning. When we met, I was delighted to find out that they're in a similar industry to me, food and drink, and that they see the world the same way as more enlightened people do in how business should operate in the world. But before I introduce them, I just wanted to reflect on something that I think ties together with exactly what they're doing and what this session's about. And that was from the Food Revolution session that we had on Wednesday. And there was a point where, during my part of that, I asked everyone to close their eyes, for those of you in the room that will remember, and think about food as your favourite food. And the thing I missed at that point, and it just struck me then, was that as we were all closing our eyes and we looked around, actually the whole of humanity was in this room, because of the 190 people different here. When you were thinking about food, you were thinking about so many different types of food that from every corner of the world. And when we said the one word food, we were thinking about so many different things that the actually diversity of what we were thinking about was the united thing about the single word of food. And I think that because food is such an important social aspect of our world, it's the sort of thing that brings us together for an initial conversation when we go on a date. And it's the sort of thing that when we have a conflict to resolve, we sit around a table. When we've got an employee issue, we go for a coffee with them. When the G8 sit together and have a real big problem, they go around and solve it at a dinner. So the point was that the whole of the food revolution session was about food for nutrition. But actually food is such a social aspect of our world that part can't be forgotten. And then when you go over back to business, it's very easy to think that business is one thing about profit. But it's not. It's about the social aspect of how business can unite us and help our society. And that's what my two guys are doing today. So I've got Adam Gagan, who is a British guy who lives in Hong Kong. And he works for Pernod Ricard and looks after brands like Absolut, Jameson's, and Jacobs Creek. And Adam is passionate about policymakers acting responsibly for the long term. He believes change must come by the generations that have most to lose. In business, in academia, in civil society, and with public institutions, new modes of operations must be found. Ones which prioritize long-term sustainability, finding ways to convince companies, industries, and indeed government agencies to commit to such long-term objectives rather than focusing on short-term political wins is a real challenge. And his fellow delegate and colleague at Pernod Ricard, Nicola McCarthy, is a New Zealander who lives in London. And Nicola is passionate about ensuring global business empowers young people to support the future of the business and acts responsibly by going beyond the standards that are enshrined in law to have higher standards of ethics. So guys, up to you.
Thank you, Paul, for the kind introduction. I know it's early, so we wanted to check that you're all awake. Let's have a quick show of hands. Who's ever had a bad experience with alcohol?
Okay, and now who's ever had a good experience with alcohol? Not too bad.
Alcohol is clearly a sensitive issue, particularly for young people. We see two main issues impacting young people: the increase of binge drinking and the younger age that people first drink alcohol. We believe there are two key ways that young people can make a difference on these issues and in business. First, by empowering young people to lead within the business. Young people have the most to lose by working in an unsustainable business. I and my young colleagues know if we wish to sustain our business and ensure the longevity of our brands over the long term, we must reduce and prevent the harmful use of alcohol now. This may seem counterintuitive to some. In the old business model, sales and profits were king, and many may question an alcohol company's true commitment to reducing underage drinking. But I see this commitment every day. I work closely with our global marketing teams to ensure our campaigns comply with our own code of ethics for advertising and to keep it updated, especially as it affects young people. How we advertise our brands is constantly changing. Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram all play a large part in how we interact with consumers. But in some countries, advertising regulations have never been extended to cover digital marketing, or at least not comprehensively. These technology changes are outpacing the law. But the law can never provide for every sector, every at-risk population, or every digital innovation that comes our way. That is why as social media evolves, the way we safeguard the interests of young people must also evolve. We audit all our platforms for the average age of users, restrict access to brand pages where possible to those above the legal drinking age, and ensure our content is not likely to encourage underage or harmful consumption. Companies must act not just in compliance with the law, but beyond it, to a higher statement of ethics.
So as Nicola has explained, our company is trying to be responsible in our actions, as I think are most who attend One Young World. This is good, this is not enough. So the second key message is that as the younger generation, we have to challenge companies to look beyond themselves and to actually lead positive change within their industries. As an alcohol company, we are quite rightly judged not just by our impact, but by the impact of our entire sector. I'm proud to say, in our industry, many companies recognize their responsibility. Last year, the CEOs of the 13 largest beer, wines, and spirits companies put corporate interest aside and came together. They made a joint commitment to reduce the harmful use of alcohol. Together, we're doing concrete actions. We're educating consumers. We're buying and providing breathalyzers to traffic police so they can really enforce the law. And we're making sure that we pressure our partners, our retailers, to check IDs, to make sure that underage people cannot have access to alcohol. We do this because we genuinely believe to be sustainable, we need to reduce the impact of our industry. We genuinely believe that we have to help the World Health Organization deliver its target to reduce harmful use of alcohol by 10% by 2025. And we genuinely believe the best way, the most effective way of doing this is together. So, the commitments, they're a good step forward. But as the younger generation, we know we need to strive for more. In Asia, where I work, the signatories of the commitments, mainly multinational companies, we represent just 5% of the total alcohol consumed. I and my colleagues in Asia, we knew to be really effective, we had to reach out to local industry. We had to go beyond our company, beyond the enlightened companies that had joined, and actually take them with us. This was our priority, and we managed to have quite a lot of success. We now have joint industry programs addressing these issues in Vietnam, in India, in Korea, in Thailand, in Taiwan, and many more under discussion. But I have to say it's hard. I see every day how challenging it is to convince your competitors to put aside their rivalries and to unite to do the right thing. Companies, we need your help. So, how can the younger generation contribute? What can you do? First, as voters, you need to pressure your governments to regulate businesses effectively. Demand they enforce the law. Demand that they make sure we deliver on the promises that we make. But you have the greatest power as employees and as consumers. Choose who you work for. Choose who you buy from. When you go back home, challenge your companies, challenge your peers. How effectively are we rewarding those companies who are trying to do the right thing? And how effectively are we punishing those who don't? Our generation can connect with each other globally to really know what business is doing. If we pressure politicians and we pressure profits, we will deliver real change. We have the tools to make our voice heard in the media, at the ballot box, and at the cash register. We urge you, please use them. Thank you.
Well, now we have someone from Peru. She works for a shipping company. She's been there for over 5 years. She's visited over 25 countries, mostly in Europe and in Asia. And she lived for 5 years working in Canada. But this is her first visit to Africa. So she studied industrial engineering, and she says that what she really wants to do is to learn, is to share experiences, and that way she feels you can actually learn from other people. So a great link with me, and I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting her this morning. Early though it was, I've enjoyed meeting her. Another thing she says is that she wants to leave an impression. So let's see if she does. A welcome to Patricia Pretel.
Thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. Buenos días. When I joined Mary's group 5 years ago, I did it as part of an international management program with people from more than 40 countries. And I'm sure many of you have similar experiences. So we took several classes together, and one of those was cross-culture. They taught us how cultural differences gets to influence negotiation, decision-making, and teamwork. And they show us how some of the basic interaction get to differ from culture to culture. The class was very interesting. But can we really get to learn about cultural differences by sitting in a classroom? What actually makes each one of us different? What really defines who we are? It's an interesting question. And I'm very sure that all of the answers would be completely different from each other. Each answer would be a whole new story, a wide range of experiences, and a new set of dreams. But it's that diversity, the one that makes our world beautiful. And it's our cultural background, the one that really defines what is important and what is valuable. So after the program, I moved to live in China, in Chengdu, for 2 years. And I was leading a team of 20 people, all Chinese. It was a wonderful experience, but it was no long until I heard, "We agree with everything you're saying, but you don't understand because you're not Chinese." And somehow they were right. I did not understand. So I remember at one point, my team was awarded as the best team of the department. And the big prize was that we had to make up a show. So we were in the middle of peak season, so I couldn't understand why we had to spend our valuable time by rehearsing for this performance. Where I come from, the prize would have been a dinner, a gift card, but never asked us to make a show. So I just couldn't get it. But I also got to understand this was not a reward for me. This was a reward for my team and for the Chinese organization I was part of. And as a leader, I had to adapt. So as a team, we picked up the World Cup song. This was long ago. So we changed the lyrics to tell our story. We didn't have time to make up a dance from scratch, so I just taught them one I already knew back from Peru. So at the end, we had Peruvian and Chinese dancing for a Colombian singer with lyrics originally about Africa, but modified to be about shipping. And it was great. We had an awesome time together. And I got to learn why this unusual prize was so important to them. Chinese is a very collective culture, much more than Peruvian. So by creating up this performance, we got to put together elements from opposite cultures. And in such a short time, we really got to deliver the team spirit. And the result was much better than I had expected. So in order to be effective in a global organization, we have to be flexible, open to learning and change, to influencing and to being influenced. So the final result is much more than the sum of its parts. For the very first time, I really got to listen and understand instead of just doing and assuming. International exposure broadens up your vision and enhances your personality. So learning to shape your leadership style to the local culture and the local needs, it's imperative if you want to get things done in a large organization, as I'm pretty sure many of you already know. So now, we all have this massive international opportunity of One Young World. Take a look around you at the more than 1,200 delegates from over 180 countries. One Young World, it's giving us the best bridge ever, an unbeatable opportunity to experience diversity as its most magnificent. So see how many of those 180 new cultures you can learn about. Get to seek out for those you have never encountered before. And share, really listen, and understand. Get to learn about all those great ideas inside those heads, and about all the dreams. And let's work together and find creative ways to overcome those diversities and work together towards a common goal. Then go back home and tell people everything you have learned. Show a deeper understanding about the way we work and the way we lead, and show a deeper respect for those who are different from yourselves. If we all do this, I am certain that as a result of this summit, we would be able to inspire others into making better business and a better world. Let's have faith on that. It will not make things easier, but it will make things possible. Thank you very much.
Patricia, fantastic. We agree you did make a great impression. It's a huge honor to introduce somebody that I only met about an hour ago, but in the context of a quick conversation, it is possible to say I feel blessed by meeting him. Here is a young man at 30, not yet, don't run, who sees the power of business combined with the potential of politics. He was thinking he might go and waste his time in Washington in the rows that are going on. But I think we've agreed that he's going to commit himself to India's successful potential for its future. Saurabh is working in California. He works for Google. He does, I think we have a few fans of Google here. And he does data analytics for Google. But here is a young man written off at kindergarten, told to his family and also to himself that he had no learning potential. He had disabilities that would inhibit him for the rest of his life. Well, he has a master's degree in engineering, a master's degree in physics. He's a successful data analyst with Google, an international businessman, and he supports incredible school developments in India, where his family are from Amritsar. So will you welcome Saurabh Mano?
My dear brothers and sisters, namaste. I'm going to share two simple stories, two little stories with you. Nothing big. But I hope they inspire you in the same way that they inspire me. In April this year, I spent 2 weeks teaching in a school called Parichay in New Delhi. Now, Delhi is the cosmopolitan capital city of India, but it is also paradoxically a sewage-filled hub of poverty. It was in one such area that the school, Parichay, was located. Most of the students were under 12 years of age. They had done multiple jobs while also going to school. During my classes, they would bombard me with questions. I want to share some of those questions with you. How was the earth formed? How big is the universe? How does an airplane fly? Why are some people poor and some people rich? Does God exist? Despite their hardships, these kids are full of optimism and a sense of wonder about our world. They dream of becoming teachers, leaders, engineers, and artists when they all grow up. Like all of us, they wish to make their families and countries proud. When you return from such an experience, it changes you at so many levels. When I went back to the United States, I experienced the same thing. Having seen an 11-year-old juggle 2 jobs and school at the same time, I could no longer complain about my own workload. Having walked with children across sewer-filled streets just to get to school, the morning San Francisco traffic does not bother you anymore. The key point is that as young employees, when we engage independently in such experiences, whether it's on a vacation or on a free time, they do enrich our perspective before anything else. My second story, dear friends, is about what happens when our employers join this initiative and help pair employees, their skills, their talents with nonprofits. Recently, Google teamed up with Hands On Bay Area in San Francisco. It's a local organization which pairs up employees with nonprofits that they feel strongly about. As a result, I found myself working with a nonprofit called Marine Science Institute. Now, imagine being a little kid for a moment. Marine Science Institute takes all kids for free on their boat into the San Francisco Bay. You get to throw a net, catch fish, measure fish, and then safely release the fish back into the ocean. This voyage of giggles, laughter, and awe builds appreciation of marine science and teaches young kids about the importance of environment. But like several other nonprofits, MSI was struggling with outreach and raising money. They also needed better internal organization. So we helped them with knowledge that I and my colleagues use and take for granted every day at work. Simplifying their computer systems itself made a big difference. We prepared a blueprint for a social media strategy, designed for an app, and a partnership with academia. As MSI continues its voyage, it is fun to sometimes sit back and think how someone like me, a nervous vegetarian, spent an entire day measuring fish on their boat. My friends, I strongly believe that global business stands to gain a lot by encouraging employees to engage and work in such projects. They are good for the individual, but they're also good for the business. For all of you as young individuals, these experiences involve unfamiliar settings, working with people you may have never met before. This is one of the best ways to learn how to lead without authority, to learn how to build a team, and to grow as an individual. Now, for the business, many employers spend a lot of money to attract and retain talent. Financial incentives like bonuses provide money. Awards provide recognition. But experiences like these, they build lasting memories, the kinds I can share with my children someday. They build a sense of connection that no other financial incentive could. Maybe not all companies can give their employees time off, but perhaps can facilitate connection between employees and nonprofits, or recognize employees who volunteer in their spare time. Finally, Carolyn Schwartz from the University of Massachusetts has found this very interesting thing in her research. Helping others leads to better mental health. Now, this is something that you heard from Ariana Huffington yesterday as well. If you want to be happy, my friends, help others. If you want to be happier, make your colleagues and friends happier by helping them help others. Let's create a ripple effect at our workplaces. Let's ask how we can encourage a culture of helping others at our own organizations. Let's ask how we can challenge our organizations to go further in creating such opportunities. I invite you to reflect. If you have a skill or talent, you owe it to give it back. Let's help create a happier, healthier, prosperous, one young world. Thank you.
Awesome. Fantastic. So it's my pleasure to introduce David Russo next. David, while in college as an engineer student, volunteered with Engineers Without Borders. And during his program there, he helped design a clinic in the Amazon and was very excited about that. Unfortunately, they found it very difficult to get the clinic funded, but then he went to work for Siemens. When he got to Siemens, he found a way to meet with the chief diversity officer. And this person helped David, kind of make his pitch to the larger Siemens, leadership team about how funding this clinic would be good for their business. And so they used a top-down approach and a grassroots approach to fund this clinic in the Amazon. And when I was talking to David earlier this morning, I think the thing that struck me that was so important to note, and I want to say it before we bring him up, is what Siemens found was it wasn't just funding it that gave the employees satisfaction. It was them giving the opportunity to let the employees volunteer at the clinic and the lasting impact that made on their lives. So let's bring it up for David Russo.
Thank you, Blake. Last year in Pittsburgh, I was inspired by Claudia Gwinnett, who spoke passionately about harnessing the potential of global business. Well, today, I'll be sharing how other One Young World ambassadors and myself are following Claudia's vision. Our story will highlight two things. One, young people can create better business. And two, global businesses can accomplish large-scale sustainable development projects while at the same time creating tangible benefits to all of its contributors, including the company itself. So let's go back 6 years. I was a mechanical engineering student at Binghamton University, and I was involved in the organization Engineers Without Borders. We had a big idea. First, think about a remote region of the Amazon rainforest. It's an incredibly beautiful place, yet there's thousands of people suffering from diseases like malaria and dengue fever, diseases that are curable through basic health care. What if we can build a clinic that a medical nonprofit can use to deliver those basic health services to that community? So we ran with the idea. We made a lot of progress. We created a great design. But as Blake mentioned, there was a lot more work that needed to be done. So we graduated, and I ended up getting a job at Siemens in the New York City area. And it didn't take long to realize that this company had all of the resources needed to build that clinic. But how could one new recruit, one voice among 370,000 global employees, build the momentum to create a clinic in the Amazon? I promise you that I did not know the answer. I just decided, take small steps, do whatever I could, and let the ideas evolve over time. So it started with informal hallway discussions. I talked to anybody I could. I built up a lot of momentum within my building, and that was good, but it wasn't enough. So later on, I got more involved in corporate social diversity activities, including the LGBT, the environmental, and the young professionals groups. Thanks to the multiplying power of networks, I instantly gained connections to people at all levels of the organization, up to the chief executive office, that spanned across geographical and generational boundaries. I talked to a lot of these new connections about the project. The approach wasn't just to figure out how to ask the company for money, but rather to discuss how we can leverage our engineering skills, our employees, and our equipment to create the project while at the same time creating those tangible benefits for the company. So our idea, having benefited from all these different perspectives and backgrounds, it grew exponentially, and executives even started contributing their thoughts and pledging their support, especially the Chief Diversity Officer, Denise Cronau, who I'm extremely grateful for. Just as this idea was becoming a reality, the global recession hit us. The nonprofit we were working for lost their funding, and we lost our construction site. Fortunately, we were able to find a new nonprofit, and we found a new build site, but the engineers had to redesign the entire project. During that time, with the help from many other employees, including other One Young World ambassadors from Siemens, we were able to create this, sorry, one second. We informally established this campaign. We called it the All for One campaign. Our vision for this campaign is to unite our employees and their networks around the world to create this clinic in cooperation with the nonprofit organization Engineers Without Borders. Today, I'm happy to say that we have over 150 employees in 10 countries signed up. They're providing support in areas such as engineering design, project management, and facilitating the donation of medical equipment. Now, I'm really happy to report that we will begin building this clinic at the end of this year. And thank you. On top of that, I'm really excited that it will deliver access to healthcare to over 45,000 indigenous Peruvians. But at the same time, I'm also really excited to share how this project has already benefited many of our employees and the company. Our employees have been gaining leadership experience, global awareness, and visibility from their upper management. The company's gaining by tapping into their existing virtual networks and replacing that traditional CSR model of giving grants. They're gaining from knowledge sharing of best practices between employees across geographies and businesses who wouldn't have otherwise communicated with each other. They're also gaining from increased job attraction and job retention of socially responsible and talented employees. So next year, this story will end with the opening of a medical clinic in the Amazon. However, we're confident that our simple model for better business will be replicated many times in the future. In closing, my advice for anyone working for a global organization or even interested in collaborating with one is just take small steps, leverage a diverse and a global network, and most importantly, make sure you create a win-win-win opportunity. Thank you very much.
He is 23 years old and he's from South Africa. His name is Monday. He does have a strong and positive attitude about the future of Africa. Monday is involved in Border of Children Home, who have 800 abandoned children around the community. He represents South African youth in G20 conference. Monday is passionate about youth being empowered to contribute meaningfully to the modern economy, and young people collaborate to find solutions to the most important issue facing our communities, our country, our continents, and more broadly, our planet. He wants young people to actively contribute to finding solutions to the biggest social issue facing Africa. He believes business trade associations traditionally advocate for better business environment, and they should have a role in a wider social change aspect of businesses. This organization should enable young professionals to have representation and active contributory role in this new direction. Monday, over to you.
Sanbonani, good morning. Let's get straight into it. We've heard many examples of really great projects all over the world and genuine pockets of excellence. Now, how do we upscale these good projects? How do we change policy and legislation in order to create the long-term and the structural social change? Very simply, I think we've been ignoring a very important platform, which are business advocacy organizations. Now, almost all of the countries represented here at One Young World have business advocacy organizations. They include the CBI in the UK, the US Chamber of Commerce in the US, Business Unity South Africa, right here at home, and so on. Their role is to advocate and represent the voice of the business community. So individual companies and businesses are members of these organizations, and these organizations then act as a bridge between business on the one side and governments and policymakers on the other. Currently, they advocate for a supportive environment for businesses to be profitable, more so than the social aims of business. And they're influential in our countries. They have direct input into national policies and legislation, and just last month, they contributed to the G20 Heads of State Summit with our presidents and prime ministers. When they speak, our governments listen. So my first and very simple point is that these organizations aren't playing a large enough and visible enough role in advocating social issues. It's a widely known fact that individual companies are playing a large role in social issues. We've seen that in this very session and over the course of this week. It makes sense then that these organizations, as the formal representatives of these companies, should also be making contributions using their platform to social issues. Now, how many of you here today in this room have heard of business advocacy organizations and seen their contribution to social change? My second point is that these organizations do not genuinely represent the voice of young professionals within their member companies. Young people below the age of 30, like us, represent approximately 28% of the workforce. So if they leave out us as young professionals, they leave out the voice of more than a quarter of the workforce that they're said to represent. With many of you in this room being young professionals, again, how many of you have the platform to contribute to what these organizations lobby for? You are part of that business community they represent, but do you have any say? And this leads to our call to action. We need to bring the voice of young professionals into business advocacy organizations by creating youth bodies within them. Then we need to actively collect the views of young professionals on key policies and legislation on an ongoing basis and make sure that these views are considered in the lobbying activities of these organizations. They already have the platform and they're giving input on legislation and policy, so the platform is there. We just have to make sure our voice is heard. Further, we need to use the platform that they have for policy and legislation in order to lobby governments on social issues, to create the laws and legislations that will take the individual CSR projects that a lot of companies are doing and scale them up and make long-lasting change. As a small example, one project led here in South Africa by young professionals is based on the belief that part of the solution to the education problem lies in linking teacher incentives and student rewards to academic performance. This has been piloted over the past 4 years at an underprivileged school in South Africa, and the pass rate has risen by over 20 percentage points. Now we need to scale that up, but we have to talk to government to do that. We have to talk to the teacher unions to do that in order to create a lasting change. And that is where we must use the platform of the business advocacy organizations to lobby for the long-term changes. So if you believe that your country has serious and urgent problems that the business community can help solve, and if you believe that the voice of business needs to meaningfully represent young professionals, then our call to you today is when you go home, start a youth body within a business advocacy organization in your country. We're doing it here in South Africa, and we've received a wonderful response. They want to work with us. And in the same way, we've also created a blueprint that you can start from. You have to approach some of the most senior people in your country in order to do this. And we've created the blueprint, and we can start from it and together do this. So let's incorporate the voice of young professionals and change the dialogue. Let's get business advocacy bodies to advocate on behalf of the profit aims and the social aims of business. It's time to use this great platform that they have in order to scale our actions and create long-lasting change for all our people. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce two wonderful people I met this morning for the first time. It's Andrea Mendoza. She's Mexican and works for AXA. And it's Paulo de Figueiredo Escobar. He's actually Brazilian, but works also in Mexico for Havas. Now, both of them met last year in One Young World in Pittsburgh. I don't know if many of you were there. And they were listening to many of the people talk about a more equitable, more sustainable world. And they got together and said, well, this world is long on words and short on actions. What can we do? They got very energized and said, coming out of Pittsburgh, we need to do something where we can have a small push in the right direction, but a big impact. Going back to Mexico, using their skills, both working in the digital area, they said we need to work on a project to create more nurses in Mexico. Nurses in Mexico, apparently, they were telling me, get paid less than maids in people's homes. Now, I think maids need to be paid more, so you can imagine how much more the nurses need to be paid. As a result, nobody wants to be a nurse, which is quite surprising because one day we might all need them. And they're people, more than any, that I think unselfishly give to society. So they've created a platform to work on getting more nurses in education, working with the government in Mexico, changing the government's rules and regulations around education. And more importantly, enrolling others and other companies to be part of their cause. They took the courage to go up to the CEOs of their own companies, AXA and Havas. And as you know, if you're young and you're on the bottom of the pyramid, there are many layers you have to go through. It sometimes feels like an elephant sitting on top of you. And yet, with persistence, they went through all these naysayers, all these skeptics, and came to the two CEOs, got them to shake hands, and they're now the biggest supporters of their project. I'm very pleased to see also that they actually met David from Siemens just before, because David is in the medical field, and next to his wonderful work in Peru, I'm sure he's going to help them as well in Mexico. They need your help as well. They're doing crowdsourcing now and obviously looking for funding. So es un placer para mí de introducir Andrea y Juan Paulo.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that, Paul. So, like Paul mentioned, Andrea and I met in One Young World in last year's summit. And at first, we knew very little about each other, and we worked for different companies. But we knew we had something in common, and that was when we went back home, we wanted to do something good. So, if we wanted the same thing, why not do it together?
Collaboration only works when the participant goals are compatible, and the sole focus is attaining such goals. Corporate objectives, society expectations, and why not, a nation goals can all be the same, provided there is a big understanding on each other's aspirations and their current relationship models. Unfortunately, for the most part, organizations are not engaged in a unified, coordinated effort when it comes to collaboration for social change. But corporates can change the basis of these relationships. For example, our companies already work together as strategic communication partners, but like many, each had their own social objectives. We wanted more than that. We wanted them to become collaborative partners for a common social good. We wanted collaboration for change.
So was it easy? I think like Adam and David mentioned, it was absolutely not easy. Our first idea was not a hit. It was actually not very well received. The second one wasn't either, and in our case, not even the third. But with every new idea and proposal that we made, we learned more about our company's decision makers, and we learned more and we gained the trust of our company's decision makers. And during this process, we learned that our company's top executives had both realistic but ambitious expectations. So we had to make our project visionary, but with a clear and detailed roadmap of implementation. So to do that, we had to collaborate with several divisions within our companies to figure out costs, to calculate return on investment, and to estimate the social impact of our project. And it was only after 7 months of hard work, actually, and when we already got the CEOs and the top executives on board with our project, that we began working on what will be our final proposal, which were 2 related initiatives and a new collaborative model for a common social good.
Being a pro-prevention company, AXA Insurance Mexico had taken on the responsibility to resolve the chronic shortage of nurses in Mexico. AXA Mexico developed the More and Better Nurses for Mexico program. The aim is to drive the education of health specialists by providing scholarships to women with lower economical status, and in this way improve their education and their work conditions nationwide. However, at this point, the program depended on AXA's funding. Looking at the program's framework, we realized that to increase its social impact, it needed to be self-sustainable. We then proposed the development of a set of digital communication platforms that empowers the program through micro-lending and crowdsourcing.
And so Havas Mexico, seeking to use digital communications responsibly, we created the Social Business Lab, a not-for-profit unit within the agency focused on providing specialized CSR consulting to our existing clients. Through the Social Business Lab, we are now developing the platforms to support the Nurses in Mexico program. And as the Social Business Lab expands, we work together with other clients and with other partners, increasing the social impact of us all, which would be much more than if we tried alone. And this new relationship is only possible through an understanding of both companies' objectives and figuring out how we could help the companies to align these objectives to begin successfully collaborating. And as young people, we took that lead, and this is a role we can all play. We, all the young leaders in this room, must seek new business models to improve the existing systems across and between organizations.
Collaboration is a key tenet of change. If we act as catalysts, returning to our communities and our companies, and stimulating collaboration between existing ideas and organizations, we will already have the pieces set in place to begin change. So, when we go back home, we should keep 3 things in mind. Think collectively. Challenge the established models. First time may not be a hit, but be patient and do not ever give up. To all of you who would like to collaborate, just to finish, who would like to collaborate before we leave, whether on the nurses project or on the collaborative business models, please send us an email to oywglobalbusiness@gmail.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done to all the speakers. That was fantastic. We're now going to take some questions from the floor. So, councillors, if you could man the mics. Paul, do you want to go maybe to the mic there? Yeah. Blake, do you want to go to the mic there where the guy with the grey T-shirt is? You two haven't done mics, you two have, yeah? So, Lord Hastings, do you want to go to the back mic? And Bethlehem, maybe the front one here. Now, the same rules, the faster and more concise the comments or questions, the more we can get in. And as this is the business session, execution and precision is very important. Paul, would you like to introduce?
Here we have Catherine from the UK.
I'm very proud to be standing here next to my CEO. I work for Unilever. So I would like to... It's been really amazing what you guys have done, but we opened the session with Blake talking about how he's created a business model that's not about donations, it's not about CSR. And I've been very proud to be working on a project in Ghana empowering shopkeepers, and it's not about donations, it's about the business case. So I ask you guys to think about, and everyone in the room, challenge yourselves to create new business models that are not about CSR and are not about donations, but they're about the business case.
Good point. Great point. Bethlehem.
I have Lynette from UK.
Hello, my name is Lynette Nyandora. First of all, hi Willow, I love you. Mommy's at One Young World. I've got two questions. Is it possible that one of the fundamental impediments facing young youth of the world leaders is the suppression of the imagination of creativity within the government-run education systems through the instilled fear of being outside of the system? Barclays mentoring, I'm lucky, one of the lucky people that I'm on the Barclays mentoring program as a result of One Young World 2010 inspired delegates on their first trip here. And my creativity has been embraced by Doug Rich's School for Creative Startups in London, and my passion for my daughter and my love to make a change through the food revolution as a vegan and vegetarian caterer. And for a better world, for my daughter's future, and, well, the rest of us as well. I think creativity, we need it.
I agree.
Thanks.
Lord Hastings.
So I have here Kaylee from Dallas, Texas.
Hey, everyone. All right, so look, guys, the truth is that corporations really can do a lot for global issues, and we can put pressure on them both internally within the corporation and externally. But as long as success for corporations is defined by profits, by growth, and shareholder value, we're always going to struggle to make the change that we want to see. So what I'm pushing for is that we actually challenge this definition of success, and we try to make this change happen more organically by redefining success to include things like community outreach, environmental stewardship, employee well-being, so that this change, again, it happens organically.
Great. Blake.
We have Stephen from the UK.
Hi, I'm Stephen here. I work for HP and a business student at Manchester Business School. So as part of my studies, I've been looking into some of the cultural difficulties they brings just around global culture in business. And essentially, whilst we can never replace local culture, how can we further instill a global culture to assist in breaking down cultural barriers, to assist with better global business, and, as was pointed out by some of the speakers, increased collaboration?
Paul.
We have the wonderful Seaman from South Africa.
In South Africa, we've had many incidences of big business corruption, resulting in billions of rands lost through collusion and price fixing. Industries such as bread, construction, which have a great impact on the poor, taking the little rands they have out of their pockets. As someone mentioned yesterday, when we talk about corruption, especially in Africa, in the private sector, we call it collusion, because the private sector cannot be corrupt. It's only the public sector. So my question is, how do we hold big business in Africa accountable, especially with the relationship historically has been a relationship where resources have been taken out of Africa instead of investing in its people and in its countries.
Thank you. Great. Bethlehem.
Meha from USA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the delegates for the excellent presentations. I work for Accenture in the not-for-profit arm for focusing on global health. I wanted to encourage all of you working for NGOs who started your social enterprises, when you approach private sector companies for aid, do not just ask for money. Ask them what they bring to the table with their skills and capabilities and their technologies. With that, you will focus on creating collaborations and sustainable solutions. Thank you.
Lord Hastings.
So here is Marika from the Czech Republic.
I've got a question for Kate and Dave. I also work in advertising. It's a very superficial world, and we do almost the opposite of what was discussed here the days before. And I want to ask the two of you, because you did it on a global level. You connected these two opposite worlds on a global scale. And I want to know what we, advertisers who live in a artificial bubble, what we can do on a local scale to change this, because I don't feel people around me even realize all these things discussed here. And by the way, big respect to the two of you, because you haven't mentioned Havas yourself once, and your actions speak for yourselves and for themselves.
Thank you. I'll comment on that in a second. Blake.
We have Frank from Hong Kong.
Hi everyone, Frank Gao from China, currently working in Hong Kong as a building sustainability consultant. And 2 years ago, before I came to Hong Kong, I and my partners found a nonprofit called US-China Clean Technology Partnership. Since then, we have held like Green City Forum. Then we also done like cultural exchange, and also the hired internship with paid course. Then, but we are having trouble now regarding our financial condition. So my question will be like, as the nonprofits at their early age, how to ensure we have a sustainable fundraising, especially during the United States government shutdown. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul.
I have Jenna from Boston.
Thank you. I work in the corporate world, and I think one of our biggest challenges, as was mentioned earlier, is management being measured exclusively on profit measures. And I think that creates a lot of barriers for management to potentially sacrifice short-term profits in order to seek long-term gain, inequality, and sustainability. So my question is, if management is not taking the lead, what are some tangible steps that we can take to influence either our organizations or even Wall Street that holds our organizations accountable to work towards lasting change?
Bethlehem.
Christina from UK.
Hi, I've just finished my master's at the Manchester Business School in entrepreneurship, and I've done most of my education in England, and I started business studies at age 14, and I've continued that into my undergraduate and my master's postgraduate. But I found that there's no education really, especially A-level and below, on social entrepreneurship and the importance of CSR. And even studying a master's in enterprise, there's not really anything on social enterprise. And when corporate social responsibility is talked about, it's more talked about as a benefit to a business trying to sell their product or looking good, as opposed to encouraging it for the social purpose. So what can we do to change that, and how important do you think it is?
This is Emily from London. She is a passionate campaigner against human trafficking and slavery.
So my question is slightly on trafficking, but also about the wider responsibility in companies. And actually, I think that companies should look at their reporting, and actually sustainability report and annual report should be combined, and responsibility should really be taken at every single stage of the business model. And especially from human trafficking, businesses should look at that code of ethics and their responsibility of actually checking in every country the organizations and the partnerships and collaboratives that they have, whether all those labour force and things like that and their code of ethics are actually enforced, and taking responsibility out of the separate, HR, CSR sustainability departments and taking that responsibility across the business.
Right.
We have Widopo from Indonesia.
Thank you. In today's business, we know that corporate social responsibility has been trending topic to the most local and global business. I have two urgent questions to the councillors and delegates. First, why today CSR? What is the right essence of CSR? But what happens to my country today is more to lead more good names and gain more profits to the company rather than for the sake of better business and the society. Why is happening like that for the CSR? And second, for young workers like us and the young businessmen like us today, how to implement the right essence of CSR, not only to gain profit for our business, but for the sake of the society. Thank you.
Paul.
Jennifer from the Big Apple.
Yeah. It's an honor to be in the same room as Kate and David, the representative of Havas PR New York City. It's great to hear your experiences. A few months ago, I made the decision to transition to the private sector after getting laid off from a nonprofit job that I loved. For someone who spent years in the NGO world, it was not easy to transition to selling my soul in a way. But luckily, my division, I don't feel like that anymore, but my division at Havas PR encouraged me to pursue cause-driven work. I believe corporate and nonprofit sectors can work together and learn from each other. My question is, how can activists like me make a difference in the corporate world? How can we use our skills and talents to make an impact and convince companies to invest in mission-driven initiatives? Thank you.
Bethlehem.
Cecilia from Argentina.
Hi, hello everyone. So we have discussed a lot regarding sustainability, not only in this session, but all over the last couple of days. So my question for all of you, especially working for non-for-profits or engaging into philanthropic initiatives, is why not move further from the traditional non-for-profit model into social business, especially after social business has proven to be one of the most sustainable ways to change the world, since it doesn't depend on donations and money from other people, but it provides its own source of income. So basically, my question is, as non-for-profits, we search for donations of money instead of creating a business that will provide the funds. Like, why don't you utilize all your sources of money and your intelligence that you use to get donations? That it's one of the main activities of a not-for-profit. So why don't you use that to create your own business? And also, this question maybe for Mr. Polman for later is, as a global company, why don't you also include social businesses in your charitable model instead of focusing only in donating in non-for-profits?
Great, thank you. Lord Hastings. Bethlehem, do you want to come back up onto...
This is Victoria from Henley-on-Thames in the UK.
Hi, I want to first of all take the opportunity to hold up my Tom's flag. Thank you very much to Blake for a fantastic insight into his organisation. He's done some amazing work. I'm from Ella's Kitchen. I'm very proud to work with Paul at Ella's Barn. And he's given us the opportunity to come here and has given us the very big challenge of going back to Henley and implementing something big. Taking everything we've learned here and really creating something new that will benefit people somewhere in the world and do something very great. I guess my point is that I think I probably feel the same way as lots of people here, in that there are so many things that have inspired me this week. There are so many problems in the world that I want to fix all of a sudden. I want to do it all at once. And I guess my question is, how do we find focus for one issue that we can solve? I just want to know how people really become passionate about just one thing and really focus. So that's my question.
Great, thank you. Blake.
Great, we have Aris from Greece.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aris. I'm from Greece. As you all know, Greece and many other European countries right now are facing a very difficult situation due to the financial crisis. People are getting fired every day, salaries are being reduced, and of course, youth unemployment is rising. But there's also a positive outcome. In Greece, especially volunteerism is becoming more and more popular among young people, and people are engaged into doing volunteer actions and achieve amazing things that the government is unable to do. Right now, 150 Greek young people, university students, who are volunteers in my social enterprise Glovo, are getting ready to accomplish 4 volunteer service actions, one of which is social cooking for 400 homeless people at the center of Athens. And this is very important because I would like to ask, my question is, how can we convince government and companies to recognize volunteerism inside businesses and actively help employees create volunteer teams and accomplish volunteer service projects as a part of their CSR strategy? Thank you.
Paul, final question from you.
Happy to introduce Sanun from the US.
Hi everyone, my name is Zanoon and I'm from San Francisco. And I consider myself a philanthropist. Now the word philanthropist is typically reserved for someone who's old and rich, might look like Warren Buffett, and definitely doesn't look like me. But I think, and I strongly believe, that there are a lot of creative and innovative ways for young people like us to take up that term, young philanthropist. Last year, in last March, I took a portion of my quarterly sales bonus and set up a match fund and encouraged my friends and my coworkers to donate money to help build a school in Africa. And within 1 month, we raised $30,000 for the school. And so thank you. My question for the panel is, how do we encourage young employees to step into the role of young philanthropists and really take that on? Thank you.
Thank you. Great, so Paul and Blake, if we can get you back up on stage. Some terrific comments and questions. We're going to ask each of the councillors to either respond to one of the questions or to give us a final thought. We'll start with you, Paul. Mike, sorry.
So my final thought really is around the best companies are those companies that are going to be built on values, and those values should be conceived and expressed from the bottom up. So from the newest recruit, the youngest people in there should have influence on what those values are in that company, and they should filter all the way up to the top, and then those values need to be lived. They need to be lived in every single aspect of how the business works, internally and externally, so that bonuses aren't just about financial performance, they're about living those values.
For social enterprises or entrepreneurs, it's not only that you're supporting your workers, but also you should have the skill to sell your product. People are not buying because you're supporting or helping others, but people are buying your products, your final products. So you should have the value, and then you have to compete with the pricing. It seems like social enterprises selling their product and expensive prices. It doesn't work like that. You should compete with others, even if you're supporting others. That's what my thought.
Thank you. I wanted to respond to, there was quite a few comments that were made that were quote-unquote anti-CSR, and that's absolutely understandable. And in a way, it's reflecting a new trend that is pulling away from just companies giving money or doing volunteer days, and quite right. I wanted to give a vivid example because in my organization, in KPMG, we've dropped the word CSR and we use corporate citizenship instead. And the reason we do that is to persuade all of our 160,000 people that they have a vivid involvement in the transformation of their cities, their communities, and their countries, which means active engagement in policy as well as developing the economies of the places they work and live in. So here's an example. Our Dutch firm sent over a group of auditors, 5 auditors, 3 years ago, went to a city called Kumasi in Ghana. It's the second largest city. They went to explore the potential for extending the economy of that city at the specific request of Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who has led the Millennium Development Goals. What we found was an unbelievable resource of bamboo that was untapped as an agricultural product. And so we then sent a second group of advisors back who worked out how to use the bamboo to turn it into the material for making bikes. In the last year, a bike factory has been created, which has now delivered 2,400 bikes to ordinary people who couldn't get access to market to take basic products. Now that's where you use intelligence, skills, and commitment in order to drive transformation and sound economy. And I really do believe that that is the long-term route forward for businesses, to deploy their intelligence and their skills as well as the resources to send people to do things to make change happen.
Where can I buy a bike?
Oh, New York, ironically.
Yeah? Yes. What's the name of the bikes? Okay, that's cool.
You know, there were several questions about, you know, how do you get buy-in if you're a nonprofit organization approaching an organization in the private sector, or you're trying to create change or a social initiative within your company. How do you get buy-in? I think one of the interesting ways to present that is that, you know, companies spend a tremendous amount of money attracting and retaining talent. I mean, that's one of the most expensive things on the line item for a company. And I think that if you can integrate the ability for the employees to feel that their purpose is greater than just the bottom line by integrating with these programs or with local nonprofits, that helps a lot, not only to attract but also retain. And so when you're trying to get the attention of the decision makers, focusing on that, I think, will help go a long way. Thanks.
Well, I think we've had some outstanding speakers this morning. Obviously, I've got a little tendency for Patricia, but I thought all the speakers had something really important to say, and I'm very pleased I'd heard it. And I think you in the audience, it gladdens my heart to hear such sensible, sane, really, really positive comments. I think this morning's, in a way, for me, been the 3 C's. It's been communication. I always say if we don't communicate, whatever we've got in our little noddle is buried treasure, and I think that's been brought out today. I think it's collaboration, as one of our people from the floor said. It's not enough just to give to charity or just to do one thing. It's to actually collaborate, and that encourages everybody. And CSR, which we've talked about, I think to say it's no longer just ticking boxes. It's for companies to be very involved with their employees and to see what people can do. So I think I will just end on saying I was very tired when I got up. I perked up with Patricia, but I'm really pleased I came. I think this is One Young World at its best. Things will change from this summit.
And Paul.
I'm equally optimistic if I hear all the things that are going on, and that's why I'm here for the 3rd time, because it really, I know that the world is in good hands with you here and with your passion and your energy. I know there's a lot of discussion about profit and measuring other things, and there's no doubt that if you start measuring other things, the environmental impacts on what we're doing, the social impacts on what we're doing, we obviously would bring more focus and we would solve some of these issues earlier. And we should fight for that we don't only measure profits and loss, just like we should not only measure GDP in its pure financial sense, but in a lot of other variables that we should bring in. But I think increasingly responsible business understands that they have to make a positive contribution to society and does not take. And businesses that just focus on the profits alone actually have a shorter and shorter life in tomorrow's world. Because if you just focus on profits alone, you focus on an outcome. You don't focus on your purpose. If you focus on your purpose, which is to, with your products or with your services, to make this a better world, you will see opportunities, you will grow, and citizens will accept you. If you focus on your outcome only, you shrink because you become very short-term focused. Average lifetime of a company, believe it or not, in the top 5,000 companies is less than 15 years. That is ridiculous. So increasingly, citizens, consumers, have the opportunities with transparency, the digitization, to see what companies are doing. And they have their opportunity with their own wallet, which is your most important power, the power of the wallet to decide where you put your money, to put it with companies that are responsible. And increasingly, anytime you open the paper, you can see that consumers are starting to exercise these rights. They don't want to buy horse meat when they think they buy meat. They don't want to buy a T-shirt when it's made for 10 cents an hour by a slave labor in Bangladesh. They don't want to deal with a financial institution that manipulates LIBOR rates. And you have increasingly that power to force companies to focus on their purpose, which is to serve society and not just to make profit.
Okay,
Fantastic.
everybody, handsets at the ready. Okay, we're going to the vote. Firstly, will you consider the statement, I will only work for companies that share my ethics? Will you please vote now?
Excellent. 72% agree.
Good, good. Okay. Businesses should define and publicize their purpose beyond their financial profit. Vote now. Okay, message to the corporate sector. Right, last but not least, businesses, okay, consider this one. Businesses should include young people on boards or stakeholder groups to which they are accountable. Vote now.
Interesting.
Okay, so
no,
you
so
next
I'll just pick
introduction.
up on, there was a question asked about advertising specifically to Kate and I, and so I write a book about why business needs to do good and can be affordable, and I was going off doing the book tour, and I thought, I'm obviously going to get the question like, you work in advertising and you've written a book about business needs to do good, you guys created the problem. And the answer I kind of was going to give, and no one ever actually asked me the question, was, if you believe that we created the problem, then you have to believe we can fix it. And if we created demand, you know, and we're part of a whole system creating demand for irresponsible products and shakes that were way too big and food that wasn't healthy, we can also create demand for responsible businesses and responsible brands and responsible products. And I genuinely believe that we have both an opportunity and an obligation to use the power of creativity, you know, to drive and change people's behavior for good. So on that note, we're going to give a huge round of applause for all of our councillors. An even huger round.